Okay, it's still June the 25th, 1994. Just a notion about change, the concept of change and steadfast in Dramatica. What kinds of change are there? We seem to have locked ourselves into a perspective where there's about one single kind of change where the person alters their inner nature. And that's all we say about it, is they just change something on that particular element. We get a hint that maybe it's just adding a certain amount or taking a certain amount away in the start and stop notion. But I began to realize around the house here that I changed in a different way I hadn't thought of before. I've always felt frustrated because I've wanted to take some time off for myself when the house was messy, mostly when it was cluttered. I didn't care about anything else, I just didn't like the clutter, and I felt that when that clutter was there, it really bothered me, and I couldn't do anything else around that I wanted to do, like read or take time off for myself. However, I came to a point the other day, now that Dramatica's over, and I was relaxed, that I said, hey, I'll take care of the things that I have done around the house, all the messes I've made, and I will take care of the back room where I spend most of my time hanging around with my computer, my CD player, my television set, and stuff like that. So, when I did that, I came out in the living room right now, and the place is an absolute mess because for several days I haven't been doing anything, so everybody's been leaving their junk all over, and I haven't been cleaning it up. I realized I changed the scope of what I was concerned with. Now, I don't think that I actually changed a single point by point of reference. We might look at objectively as we look at the objective story and say what I did was change from morality to self-interest. It might be a way of looking at it, or from non-acceptance to acceptance. But that hasn't been a complete change in me in all instances. Generally in stories, when we see someone like Scrooge, we see him applying the notion of the problem everywhere equally to all situations, not to just specific ones, and as a result he needs a general cure. Whereas in this particular instance, the problem that I was suffering was because I was trying to take care of all the work everywhere, and now I've limited it in two ways. I'm not concerned with anything outside of this back room that I'm in now. That area, I'm concerned with all the mess that everybody leaves around. But again, even in that room, I've divided it up so that only the half that I operate on is under my concern, and the rest of it, where most of Mary's stuff is, doesn't really matter to me. So I've limited the scope there in terms of where I'm concerned, and also limited it in terms of who I'm concerned. I'm still concerned about the mess I'm making, but not concerned about the mess anybody else is making. Now, this is a radical change. I used to be embarrassed when somebody came over and the place was a wreck. It doesn't embarrass me anymore, which is really funny, because if it was my house that I had alone and I felt responsible for everything, then indeed I would feel embarrassed when somebody came over and saw the place dirty, because it would reflect on me. Well, it probably still reflects on me, and yet somehow inside myself I've disassociated from that and feel it's not my responsibility, and also felt that somehow it just doesn't bother me because I know that I'm not taking the responsibility for it. So in a sense, it might go between responsibility and commitment, or a degree of that or something, but it's change in scope, not a change, binary change in that it exists at all, or that we get more of this or less of that, a direction of change. It's a change of size. And I'm beginning to think that maybe the different way a subjective interpretation of the concept of change could be put together is from a male or female perspective in terms of mental sex. And part of that would be the way the main character would perceive the nature of the change in themselves, depending on their mental sex, and also part of it would be the way the audience would achieve the nature of the change, depending on mental sex. So when you are writing a story, writing it as a male or as a female is going to make a difference as to the way you will couch your phrases and the aspect of the change that you would be describing. probably both kinds, the binary in the essence of increasing or decreasing the size or changing the direction, or perhaps increasing or decreasing the speed or acceleration. In other words, all of the 6 dynamic pairs, probably each one has its own unique impact on change, and they probably all exist, and depending upon which one the author chooses to emphasize is going to have an impact on how the audience perceives the author behind the story. In fact, it may actually create the overall viewpoint of the story from a male perspective or a female perspective, on top of the story mind itself having a male or female mental sex in general. The conjunction of all those possibilities lead to some interesting conclusions on the possibility of an overlay template of the author's mind upon the story mind, just in terms of how the change would be measured. And of course that means that many other aspects of the story would be interpreted differently as well, depending on the mental sex of the author.